And welcome to Handel's Building Blocks Community's 2025 Women in Construction Week, a week dedicated to celebrating some amazing pioneering women within the construction industry today. My name is Lori Drake, and I'm the Building Blocks Community Manager here at Handel. And in this special edition series, we will recognize incredible contributions by women in construction, explore the challenges that they have faced, and highlight their inspiring success stories. Today, we're kicking things off with our exclusive interview of Kim Kinsella, CCE, Senior Director of National Credit Operations at Ferguson Enterprises. With over 20 years of experience at Ferguson and the prestigious CCE designation from the National Association of Credit Management, Kim exemplifies how growth, both personal and professional, along with a strong work ethic, can drive a successful and impactful career. Kim, congratulations again on being selected as a woman in construction, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be chosen.
I see you were just promoted about 6 months ago to your new position. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do now for Ferguson?
Absolutely. Well, I reside in Indiana with my husband and my dog and my cat. I have a grown son and then a daughter that is finishing up at Indiana University this year, which happens to be my alma mater. I did not go to school for finance. I actually went to become a teacher. I wanted to be an English teacher in high school and ended up stumbling into the career of credit. Certainly not a planned event. But once I was in, I was all in. I learned to do credit by sitting in front of videos that taught me how to negotiate and ask for money. And then they kind of put me in the deep end. This was with a former company. And then, like you said, about 23 years ago, I ended up with Ferguson. I've done a lot of different roles in my time at Ferguson. I was in the field, primarily working with customers, going on customer visits, really engaging and trying to build a relationship with those customers so that we could have the best conversations possible when we had to have tough conversations. And then I moved into more of a manager role where I was managing people in the field like me that were engaged with customers. And then to your point, most specifically, or most recently, I should say, I was promoted to Senior Director of National Credit Operations. And this is a little bit of a departure from what I had been doing before, still certainly in the realm of credit, but really more focused on the customer service side of things. So there's kind of two parts for what my role is. One is to work with a remote team that helps the customers across the country or helps our credit associates across the country with items like processing lien waivers or taking payments from our customers, or just answering general questions from our customers regarding their account. But the other side of it, of the customer experience side, is really trying to figure out ways to improve that customer experience. So whether that's through automation, whether it's through process improvement, or whether it's by finding the best vendors that we can work with to, again, increase that customer experience. That's what that side of the role is focused on. And that's something new and really excited about that. It's been a very interesting, challenging part of the role, but I really like it. And I think that's really what's going to take us into the future.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So tell me about how you wanted to be a teacher, but something drew you into this direction.
Well, I decided that at the time when I wanted to be a teacher, I really didn't have the confidence that I wanted or needed. I thought to be a successful educator and make sure that I was holding the kids accountable. And it's all I'd ever wanted to do. And then once I graduated and got my degree, I was like, I don't think this is really for me. And ended up doing a couple of different roles, but I ended up working for one of my friends' fathers, just really more as like project management. I did some payroll. And at the time, it was a home health care agency, and the finance manager, we realized, had been embezzling money for years. And the IRS was involved, the FBI was involved. And he looked at me, the owner looked at me, and he was like, I don't know who I can trust anymore. Can you do the role? As I said earlier, I wanted to be an English teacher. I didn't take a math class in college. So I bought an accounting book and was like, okay, I'll see what I can do. Now, I had some outside help with an accounting firm, but really, I learned to do payables and receivables and decided that I actually liked that side, and then ended up going to work for another company that was not in construction, but they're the ones that sat me down and said, "Hey, here, watch these videos." And then, like I said, ended up at Ferguson. I never would have expected to end up in any sort of accounting role. I never took a single accounting class, but I really like this. I think of it as more life math than I do, like, geometry and algebra, which were not
I
my
like you put that way.
fortes. But this kind of math made sense to me. So yeah, it was just a real interesting way to end up in credit.
What has been your most rewarding experience?
I think this goes back really probably to more of my teaching background, but I spent a lot of time in this role educating new credit associates as they come out of college. We have a program where we'll put them through a training process. So when I was in the field, I did a lot of that. But I think most recently, and what I'm most proud of is really educating associates on building their confidence with credit. I think that this role is particularly challenging. We are faced or surrounded by a lot of really big personalities, and you are faced with having a lot of very tough conversations, whether that's with customers or sometimes within your own organization. And it's a very big balancing act in what we do. And I think a lot of times we really question whether we are doing the right thing because you're getting pulled in so many directions. And so what I've been trying to do is give people the tools to help increase their confidence in areas like decision making or being able to engage better with the customer. How do you just sit down and have a conversation? Because sometimes that's really awkward for people. Is it, being able to speak to your senior leadership about what you want this relationship with our customer to look like, or really just generally believing that you deserve to have a seat at the table? And I think that's where people get the most stuck, is that they, for whatever reason, whatever background they've come from, they just don't feel like they deserve to have a seat. And that's just simply not true.
I love that. And on the side of the women in construction, do you see any challenges that they would face going into taking that seat at the table?
I think that back when I first started, there was I had a lot of challenges when I first entered construction specifically, not just credit, but credit construction. There were a lot of times where I was dismissed just because I was a woman in the room, or they'd look to the man that was sitting next to me instead of paying attention to me. Or, sometimes it was just some inappropriate comments that, you had to deal with. I think in general, in construction, you kind of have to have a little bit of a thicker skin if you're going to do this role. But I think a lot has really changed in the last, again, over 20 years. I think that there's a lot more women-owned businesses in construction, which is fabulous. There's a lot more women in credit leadership. I don't think that we're facing today what I faced, all those years ago. I'm not saying that there's not challenges that a female might face, but I think in general, a lot of those have really kind of settled down.
How did you deal with the challenges that you had faced in the past?
Well, the first thing I did was I called my husband on one of my lunch breaks and was like, I made a bad decision. I think this is the wrong move.
They're good sounding boards.
Yeah. I was like at lunch, and it was 3 weeks into the role. And I'm like, I don't think this is a good choice that I made. But I had a lot of great support at Ferguson and great leadership, and really was able to just rely on, them as sounding boards and how I could, maneuver through some of these pieces. So yeah.
That makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
So you had mentioned that you grab people out of college, bring them into Ferguson, give them training that way. What could you do to entice a woman to join into this field?
I think it's been fascinating. And I don't know that this is drawing a woman in or just drawing people into the construction industry, but I think it's fascinating. I mean, if you think about all the projects that we're surrounded by, whether it's on the road or a house or a building, I mean, every time I would walk into a construction site, I would be so intrigued by how they're going about building it, what's needed to do it, what kinds of our materials we're supplying to in order, to make them be able to build those buildings. I just find it fascinating. And I think it's interesting every day, personally. Inevitably, you'll walk into a restaurant or a restroom or
Mhm.
something, at least, that Ferguson would supply to and be like, oh, hey, that's our product. Hey, that's our product. And then I get my husband and he's like, hey, I was just over here. They had, XYZ vendor there. And I was like, that's right.
Treating
Everybody's
it a
drinking the
little.
Kool-Aid. That's right.
That's awesome. Well, do you have any advice for women that are trying to progress in their career?
So I think you need to be curious. I think it's very important that you understand more than just what your role is and not just come into your role and go home. I think that you have to really understand the bigger picture in order to be successful. You've got to understand how your role impacts the organization, what you need to do in order to be successful in that role. You've got to think about the challenges that your customers are facing and how they impact the organization. You've got to think about all of those factors, I think, in order to be really good at credit. I think the other thing that we talked about earlier is certainly confidence. It's making sure that you are speaking up when you have ideas and that you believe in your abilities, which I know can be shaky at times, but it's important that you dig deep and find that confidence. And I would say network. I think that is such an important part. I learned so much from joining credit organizations when I was first in this role. You learn a lot from people that have been doing this for a while. And I just think it was super impactful for me to have that network to fall back on when I had questions about things or weird situations maybe that no one had ever heard of. And it's nice, especially having done this for so long, seeing those faces over and over again at different credit organizations or credit foundations and things that we're able to engage with. I think, people are afraid to ask for help sometimes. And if you can just put that aside and just admit that sometimes you need some help, you'll find that I feel like the credit network in general is just a really giving network of people. They're willing to share information and really help you out. And they've just been an incredible resource.
Well, I would say that's one of the reasons you were chosen as a 2025 Woman in Construction, because you are sharing your experience and you are giving help to someone that might need it in the future. And that's really much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, one final question. Give us a funny story or experience that you've had in your career.
Okay. Well, I was on a customer visit, and the salesperson and I were trying to talk to one of our customers about some debt that he owed us. And as we were sitting there, he had a plan that he wanted to implement in order to get us paid back. He had some very prized horses, and he felt like if he was able to sell some of the horse, I guess there was like a mail order need for horse DNA, that he would be able to garner a lot of money from that. And that was his initial plan in order to get us paid. We did get paid, but I did come up with a different plan instead of that one. But it was definitely the most unique suggestion that I'd ever heard.
Thought I'd heard everything. That is definitely unique. Well, this has truly been an inspiring conversation, Kim, and I want to thank you for taking the time to meet with us. And stories like yours definitely show why Women in Construction Week, it's important. It's important to get those stories out there and let people know what is available to them. And thank you again for tuning into our Women in Construction 2025, and we'll see you next time.